All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 3. I just want a quick announcement. Going forward, we'll be using Zoom for live streaming and recording the lectures. And so if you're tuning in live, weblab.is/Zoom to join the Zoom call. And we'll be sharing multiple displays on Zoom. And to switch between displays, you can click View Options at the top and switch between the screens under Shared Screens. And if you'll be watching the recording, we'll aim to have the code be the primary screen shared and have the board and slides overlaid somewhere in the recording. And we probably won't be using Panopto anymore, but if you have any feedback, just let us know, and we'll try to see what we can do. And so with that, thanks everyone for the feedback so far, and I'm going to hand it off to Abby and Tony for announcements.
So, just as a reminder, we have milestone 0 due tonight. So if you haven't logged in your team yet, team of up to 3, and submitted your 10 project ideas, please do so by tonight. It is due tonight. Also, our recordings are up at weblab.is/recordings. But as you can tell, we are having a lot of difficulty trying to find what is the best way to record everything for you guys. We heard that the Get lecture was a little blurry and hard to see, and on certain times you switched around and tried it around different systems. So, are certain lectures too blurry to rewatch? Please tell us on weblab.is/milk and cookies. Tell us if you would want to benefit, if you would benefit a lot from some of the recordings.
Yeah, we also, so we're going to go back and look through and edit some of the recordings that are on there. So those are not necessarily final if we can find better camera angles to capture what's going on. But definitely let us know on the Milk and Cookies forum or in Piazza or Questions Doc, wherever, if you actually want to watch a recording of a previous lecture, if you think you would benefit from that. And if so, we can re-record whatever we need to get, for example, the stuff from the Git lecture or the board work from the JavaScript callbacks lecture, etc. And as usual, weblab.is/home for all your links, weblab.is/Q for help queue, and questions for Questions Doc, both of which are applicable for today's lecture and workshop. Please use the help queue and the Questions Doc if you're confused, because we are starting to dive into some of our harder and more complicated workshops. And as always, WebLab goes fast. It is okay if you do not understand everything the first time around. All right, and now I'm going to pass it off to Kenny and Enrique to dive into React.
Okay. So today we're going to be diving a little more into React. We're actually going to start implementing ourselves just to get a better sense of how things will work as we code up our websites. Okay. So before we get started, actually, we noticed that 85.2% of you are not subscribed to the WebLab YouTube channel. So if you could please go to the WebLab YouTube and subscribe. Make sure to hit the notification bell as well. That would be really helpful. So yeah, we can get all the subscribers. Maybe we can hit 2K. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, check out the YouTube channel. There's a bunch of recordings on there as well from previous years also. It's a really good resource, actually. Okay, so let's do a quick React recap before diving into the actual workshop. So again, React, the main idea is to be able to write our websites, kind of just abstract it all away into one line of code and create it using our components. And so let's recap. In this example, let me close this here. In this example, let's say that we have Twitter. And we have here the root component app. So if you remember from yesterday, we can break down any application into a set of components, into a tree component hierarchy. So I'm going to ask all of you for any suggestions on what you think could be components within this website, within Twitter. So any ideas? Yeah, in the back. Okay, yeah, that's good. So we have the bar on the left, which let's say we can call the nav bar. We have the middle content, which we can say is this feed. And then we have a bar on the right, which we can either treat as one component or like we can also split it up into two separate sections. For example, we have trending on the top right and suggestions who to follow on the bottom. On the bottom. Within feed, let's take a look at within feed. We can break this down even further. So we can say that each tweet within our feed is its individual component. Similarly, within the suggestions box, we can split up the profiles that appear there as individual components as well. These can be thought of as very reusable components that we can just create using a skeleton and implement in React. Some other possible components could be the profile on the bottom left, maybe also the search bar that could be treated as a component. And also for each tweet, we noticed that they all have the exact same bar at the bottom for replies, retweets, likes, etc. So maybe that could also be abstracted away as a component. Okay, so recap again. So props, those are one of the very important features of React. So this is, again, is information or inputs passed down from a parent to a child component. And the way that this is implemented in React is using these attributes within the component. So for example, here we have the name attribute, and we have the text attribute. And these are space-separated attributes that we have for each component. So these are our props. Next is state, and again, this is updatable pieces of information, and this is maintained by a component. So it's not really passed anywhere unless it's as props. But the syntax for this is we use the useState hook, this function here. We pass it an initial value, in this case either busy or false if we want some sort of toggle. And then what that returns is two values. So the first is the actual state value. So in the first example, it's status. And the second value is the state setter. This is a function that we can call to update that state within React. And so we'll look into how to implement that in the workshop. So to recap, we can create the component tree of Twitter. So we can say that navbar is a subcomponent or a child of the app, the overall app component. Feed as well can be considered that. And then also these boxes on the right here, trending and suggestions, can be considered subcomponents of app. Under feed, as I showed earlier, we can have a bunch of tweets. And then under suggestions, we can have a bunch of different profiles. So let's take a look at some specific examples of what this would look like if we implemented this in React. So let's say app.js is our main file representing the app component. And if you remember from the previous lecture, we have this JSX that we can write here in the return statement of our component function. So we have here at the top we have app.js, and we have the function app that has the return value with the JSX. And in this case, since we have these four child components, we're actually going to put those four components within the return JSX. And we use the syntax here with the self-closing element. And since we have this box on the right here with both the suggestions and the trending, we can kind of try to put these in its own div and maybe style it using Flexbox or something like that. So yeah, that's what it would look like. For feed, for example, we might need a little bit more information. So the first thing that you might notice here is that the feed can have many different tweets. So we might want to represent all the tweet data as state within the feed component so that we can mutate it, we can change what's appearing in the feed. And so the way that this would look in the implementation is we'd need some sort of use state or some state within feed. And we'd use the syntax that you'll have seen. So use state, we initialize the tweet data as an empty array, and we have our state setter function. And let's say the tweets are loaded from some external source. We'll be talking more about this later. But we can actually set that tweet data to whatever tweets that we loaded in from wherever. You don't have to worry about where exactly the data is coming from, but the important thing to know is that we can update the array of tweet data using this function here. And then in our JSX, we want to actually render the child components, so the tweets. So what we can do is just put a bunch of these tweets in here and pass in the appropriate props given the correct tweet data. So for example here, we can give the username of the first tweet, and we could set that to be tweet data at index 0, and we can get the username property from that. And then lastly, we have tweet, of course. The tweet doesn't necessarily have any props in our simplified example, but as we showed just now, it gets passed in the individual tweet data as props. So this is how we would implement it in React. So we have the function const tweet, and we pass in props as an argument to this function. And then we can use this props object, with this JavaScript object, to access the different props that it receives from the parent component, in this case feed. So we, for example, can load in the tweet header, and by displaying the profile picture, the username, and the date posted. And then maybe we have also a paragraph element representing the prop, the tweet content. And we can add just as much stuff as we want in this JSX. Okay, so just to recap everything that we just mentioned. So a React component lets you break down a chunk of your UI into reusable, independent pieces of code. The component can be represented as HTML, or it can as just standard HTML, or it can be represented as other React components as well. And it can receive and maintain its own information, either through props or state. And it uses this component, overall components tree structure, to pass information throughout your website. And then, as I mentioned earlier, again, each component can take in props, which are the inputs, or it can manage its own state, which is mutable data. And again, there's our React guide that you can check out if you want to see more. Okay, any questions before we get started with the workshop? All right. So today we're going to be actually looking at the Catbook example that we saw earlier in the class, and we're going to actually be converting it into React. So we're going to be converting all that this Catbook profile into React. So here's an example of what we're going to be making. Let me pull up the final code. So I'll do check out. No need to follow along here. I'm just going to show here what we're going to work towards. So here we can see that we have the profile page, and we have the profile icon, your name, the same about me and favorite type of cat as you saw previously. But now we're going to add this additional feature here, which is the cat happiness. And so what we'll be able to do is when we click on the picture, it'll increment this cat happiness, infinitely as long as we keep clicking, or when we refresh, it'll get reset. So that's going to be the goal for today's workshop. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get set up and look at the starter code. So first, I'm going to give you all a few minutes to make sure that you have the right version of Node. So open up your terminal or VS Code integrated terminal and run the command node/-v. And you should check that you should get a version 18.13.0 or any Node version of higher than or equal to 18. And yeah, if you're not seeing that, please add yourself to the help queue so you can try to get that updated for our workshop. Does anyone need more time to check? Okay. Okay. So the next step is to, as we've done for all the previous workshops, so open up the Catbook React folder in VS Code, open up the terminal window, and make sure you're actually inside of the Catbook React folder. And then you can run the following commands. So git fetch, git reset -- hard, git checkout w2 starter. And this last command, npm install, is a little different from what we've seen before. This will install all the dependencies that we need to run our React code. So as we mentioned from the beginning, React is a JavaScript library. It's not native to JavaScript. So we need to actually import it. And so to do that, we need to install all the dependencies that React uses. So that's what this will do. It'll take a few seconds. And again, if you run into any trouble with this, please put your questions in the questions doc or add yourself to the queue, and someone can help you out. So I'm going to reset hard, and I'm going to go to W2 starter. And one thing you'll see is once, if you've successfully done npm install, you should see this node modules folder here, and it'll be grayed out because it's in the it's being ignored by our Git. But you should see that if you open this folder, you'll see a bunch of things that you don't have to worry about what's inside of this. Just know that these are basically all the dependencies that React and the other libraries that we're using have. So does anyone need more time for that? Oh. What happened? Yeah. Oh, shoot. All right, give us 1 second. Then reshare. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So hopefully everyone has all the dependencies installed. And so the first thing we want to do before coding, we're almost there, but let's actually break down the component tree for Catbook. For simplicity, we've already done that for you. So we have app here at the top. We have navbar, we have profile, and cat happiness. And so what we can do is we can identify the different components that we're going to see. So navbar will be this blue bar here at the top that has the name Catbook. Profile will represent this whole entire screen here with the image, the name, and all these sections down here. And then lastly, cat happiness is this actual box here that has the value for the cat happiness. So this is kind of our component tree that you'll want to reference when we're writing in React. And let's also take a few minutes to understand the starter code. So there's a bunch of stuff going on in the code, so let's try to make sure that we understand it. So at the top level here, if you look at in your VS Code, you'll see that there's a src or source folder, and this basically contains all of the code that you'll be working with. Everything else is kind of just this boilerplate stuff that we don't really need to worry about at the moment. But everything you'll need will be found in source. Specifically, we'll look inside of the components folder because, as we all know now, React apps are made of a bunch of components. The first component here, app, if you remember, this is kind of the starter point, the entry point, our root component. For this workshop, we won't need to edit this, so feel free to ignore that. But again, this is their entry point for any React app. Then the 4 files that we will need to edit are these 4 in the bottom. So cat happiness, navbar.js, navbar.css, and profile.js. So these first 3 are in this modules folder, which represent these kind of reusable components. So cat happiness and navbar. This last one, profile, is in pages. The reason it's in pages is so that in the future we might want to change the page. So if we go to our Catbook here, you'll see that we're going to eventually have a navbar at the top, and we'll be able to switch pages by clicking on that navbar. So we're going to want to replace this entire component with a new page. So that's why that profile is under the pages directory. Okay. And again, no need to edit any CSS or any other files besides navbar.css. That will be the only one we're working with. Any questions about the setup? Okay. One final thing, notes about element classes. So remember that we need to use class name instead of class when we're trying to add CSS styling. Again, this is because class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript. The second thing that we usually do by convention is to prefix any class name that we have with the component name. So we have, for example, if we're writing a class in app, we'll prefix any class name with app. So that component name. So why do we do this? So this is basically so that we don't have the same class names across the many different components that we might have within our app. Otherwise, React might get confused and not know what exactly to display. And another reason is because the CSS will always apply to the entire web page. So you might see some inconsistencies if you have the same class name appear in multiple different components. So again, make sure to prefix all your classes by the component name. Okay. So now let's actually start running the code. So the way you do this is with the command npm run hotloader. So this will open up a local development server on your computer, and it'll automatically and what you can do is you can navigate to this. So I've already run this command here, and so you'll see some output like this. And what you can do is you can navigate to localhost 5050, which I've done here. And what this will do is whenever you make changes to your code, it'll automatically update the view that you see in your browser. So this is similar to, if you're working with plain HTML, if you use some sort of live server extension or live preview. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds to open this up. And once you do, you should be able to see what we have here. Yeah. Raise your hand if you're not seeing this in your browser. Okay, I'll give everyone one more minute.
Mm-hmm. Why?
Okay, if you're still stuck, please add yourself to the help queue, and someone can help. Okay, so finally, we can actually start coding. So step 0 will be to implement the navbar. Again, make sure to run the commands git reset -- hard and git checkout w2 starter. Make sure you're on that starter branch. So what we're going to be doing in step 0 is we're going to be implementing the navbar. So previously we did this with vanilla HTML, Now let's go ahead and do it with React. So the two files we'll be working in are navbar.js and navbar.css. So our two tasks are A, to implement the return statement in navbar.js with HTML code. Remember, this is actually our JSX that we want to implement. The second task is to implement navbar.css. And feel free to implement this however you want. This is what it looks like in our version, but feel free to add your own twist. You can change the colors, the font, anything like that. And remember that to add classes, use class name instead. And so you'll see a couple hints in the code here. So what you can do is we can take a look at old index.html. If you scroll down here, you'll see old index.html. And if we open this up, this is kind of the old file that we were using to render Catbook. So you can take a look, try to find the navbar, and basically use that to implement this in React. So I'll give you all a few minutes to try this. It says full screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and implement this, so feel free to follow along. So what we can do is we can take a look at old index.html, and we can find the navbar here at the top of the body. So we have these two elements, nav and this div that contains the text. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this all and go into our navbar.js file. And I'm going to actually just return this for now. There are going to be a few edits that we need to make. So the first thing we need to make sure of is to change the class attribute to class name, because again, in React, we have to use class name. And the second thing I'm going to do is use our convention of prefixing the class name by the actual component name. So instead of nav container like this, I'm going to say navbar dash container. And the same thing, navbar dash title. And so hopefully we'll see now that there is a little text here at the top left. It's really small right now, but that should be our navbar being correctly rendered. And then next, for styling, we can go into navbar.css, and we can basically just use our CSS selectors for the classes that we just defined. So we navbar dash let me see, container, and navbar title. And we can basically apply, any CSS that we want here. So I'm going to actually just look at, what we had here. So yeah, so for this container, we decided to go with our padding using the 8-point system that was discussed yesterday. So we'll have 8 pixels on the top and bottom, and 16 pixels on the left and right. We'll go ahead and change our background color. So this will be our patented WebLab Blue 60FF. And then navbar title, we'll change the color of the text, and we'll change our font size to make it a little bigger. So color will be white, and the font size will be 20.
Ooh, this profile picture is so bad.
What? Yours?
His, look.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
I don't think I need to see it. Like, his...
Oh my goodness.
His is the one that's already...
Wait.
No. I don't... Oh,
I get it. Okay.
Oh, it stops screen share. Yeah. But yeah, basically, this is actually it for step 0. So while we wait, if you want to go ahead and check out step 1, you can do that, and I'll pass it on to Kenneth to finish us off.
Yeah.
All right, does anyone need more time? Or time to understand? Okay, cool. We'll wait for a few seconds. When you guys are ready, just look up so I know when to proceed with the next step. All right. For the sake of time, we're going to move on, but if you need help, just join the queue or ask on the questions doc. And yeah, so we're going to get into some of the main part of the workshop, which is actually using React. So we're going to try to add the cat happiness component to our profile. So if everyone can run git reset -- hard and git checkout w2 - step 1. So you should see something like this in profile.js and cathappiness.js. Some of you were confused in the feedback form about like the general structure of React files, and it really varies by whatever your website is. So you can really lay it out as however you want. Enrique talked about it a bit during this lecture, but just wanted to rehash. So everything in the front end is probably going to be in the client folder here. And within this, you have like a dist folder, which is some bundled front-end code. You don't really have to worry about it. You're mainly going to be dealing with stuff in the source folder. And within the source folder, you can have some components. And within these components, you can have some pages and modules. So pages are, like the profile page, like pages you can see on the website. If we had like another tab on the website, you could probably add another page. And modules are any components that you want to use in those pages. So in this case, we have a profile page and a cat happiness module. So if you can open up those two files, that's what we're going to be working with. All right, is everyone caught up? Thumbs up if you are. Cool. Oh. So can anyone tell me, I kind of flashed the answer on the screen, but can anyone tell me what component should store the cat happiness state? Raise your hand if you think it should be in profile. Okay. Raise your hand if you think it should be in cat happiness. Okay. So we have a couple of mixed answers. So it should actually be in profile. Why is this the case? If you remember the example we showed at the beginning, we wanted to click the picture of the cat in order to update the cat happiness. And the thing is, this picture is stored in the profile. It's rendered in the profile component, or the profile page. So in order to actually update the cat happiness when the cat is clicked, we need to store the state, cat happiness, in profile. So when we do that, we can actually pass the state setter into the cat happiness, we can actually pass the state as a prop into cat happiness component, so that we can actually render the cat happiness inside the cat happiness component. But the state is going to be defined in the profile component. All right. So can anyone remind me what the function name was to add a state to a component? You can just shout it out if you know. Yeah, use state, nice. So remember, we use the function, we have to import it from React library, use state to define a state. And this is the syntax for use state. So so we're going to have like a const here and then an array. And inside this array, we're going to have the state name, which in this case is just called something, and then the state setter, which we name set something. And then we're going to have this equal to use state of whatever default value our state wants to be. So let's get some practice using that in actual code. So step one is going to be just all about adding cat happiness. And some of our subtasks are going to be adding the cat happiness state to profile.js, then importing the cat happiness component in profile, adding the cat happiness component to profile, and then finally displaying the cat happiness state in the cat happiness component using the props that we passed down. So since this is a bit complicated, let's go through each of these tasks together. So the first thing is to add the cat happiness state to the profile. So this is where we want to actually use our use state function. So I'll give you guys like a minute to do this, and then we can come back together again. All right, raise your hand if you need more time. Okay, I'll go ahead and add the line. So here, in profile, let's just say we want to define the state called cat happiness. So under here, we have the syntax const and then cat happiness, and then the state setter, which is set cat happiness. And we set that equal to useState of our default value, which in this case we want to be 0. So everyone got that down? All right, let's move on to the next task. So the next task is to actually import the cat happiness component. Remember our structure from before that we have our cat happiness component defined in the modules folder. So we're going to want to do something similar to like the import statements above here, except just import in the cat happiness component. So I'll give you guys like 30 seconds to do this. All right. So let's type out this import statement together. So up here we can import cat happiness from, and then the path is .. modules / cat happiness. And just recall that in cat happiness, the last part of our component was actually exporting the component. So since we exported the cat happiness here, cat happiness is the name of the component, we can just import up here in profile.js. All right, any questions? Awesome. Yep. So let's move on to the next step. This step is a bit more complicated since we want to actually add the cat happiness component to our JSX. So if you scroll down in profile.js, you can see a to-do for step 1C. So let's add in the cat happiness component to the JSX in profile.js, as well as a header in front of it to look like what we had on the example website. And when you're doing this, just remember that the way we pass in a prop is to have the component name, and then the prop name equals to the prop value. So I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to do this. All right, raise your hand if you need more time. All right, let's give a few more seconds. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. So in order to add the cat happiness component in the same style we added the other containers, we can basically just more or less copy and paste what we had in the other containers. So let's replace this to do. So I just copied and pasted whatever was below. And in this case, instead of my favorite type of cat, we want to just render cat happiness. And also, instead of the div here, we can call the cat happiness component in order to actually render the number. So let's just use the syntax we learned before, cat happiness. And then in this case, we want to pass down a prop called cat happiness. So there's a lot of repeated names here, but the prop, just to clarify, we have a state here called cat happiness, which we defined just now. And the prop name is also called cat happiness. And the component name is called cat happiness, where the C is uppercase. All right, so moving on. Are we done yet? Do we have a rendered website? I guess like if we look at the local host. I guess the local host isn't working for some reason. Let me look at what's happening. All right. Let's just move on for the time being. That is so right. I was going to take a note of this, but I forgot. Yeah, basically, I made a mistake that I've made a lot of times before, and it's easy to make, but this is a good time to tell you guys that, to remind you guys that we actually have to import useState from React also. This is because useState isn't imported natively because it's just like a special function that React provides. So we actually need to add this to our top import statement in the React in the import statement. So now if I go back, yeah, it should render what we did. All right, so are we done yet? Do we have what we want on the page yet? No, we're not done because we need to display the cat happiness here. So if you scroll, or if you go to cathappiness.js, you'll see here that we have a to-do step 1D. And here, we want to actually display the incoming cat happiness prop. So make 2 changes to this file, and I'll give you guys like a minute to do this in order to display the cat happiness on the website. All right, let's come together again, and let's import the props or let's use the props to render the cat happiness. So remember, in order to actually use the props that we passed in, we need to have props as an input to the component. So let's define props up here. And then down here, to actually render them, we can enter the JavaScript environment by using the curly braces and then just call what we passed in. So props.catHappiness. And then if we scroll over to our website, we can actually see that we rendered cat happiness successfully. So we're not done yet because we have a state, but we never actually set the state. We never update our website. So when we click this corgi picture, nothing actually happens yet. So let's move on to the next step, which is updating cat happiness. So everyone please run git reset -hard and git checkout w2-step 2. All right, anyone need more time to do this? All right, let's move on. So in this step, all we want to do is update the cat happiness state whenever we click the picture of the cat. So we have two tasks here. The first one is to actually implement an increment cat happiness function, which will increment our cat happiness by 1. And then the second thing we want to do is call this increment cat happiness function whenever the profile picture is clicked. And just a hint here that all divs have like an on-click prop that takes in a function. Abby, in her lecture, described callback functions. This is just a callback function. And then whenever a div is clicked, it runs its on-click function if you define it. So all of this should be in profile.js. So you'll see here we have a step 2a and a step 2b. So I'll give you guys like 3 minutes to implement these two steps. raise your hand if you need more time with the step. All right, let's give another 30 seconds. All right, so let's get on the same page. So the first thing we want to do is implement this increment cat happiness function. And what this will do is it'll update the state of cat happiness whenever the user clicks on the picture. So down here, we can use the state setter function that we had before to set cat happiness to whatever was before plus 1. And then down here, remember that we have to use the onClick prop. So in this div, we can define an onClick here and just pass in the increment cat happiness function. And then if we go to our website, you can see that whenever we click the picture of the cat, our cat happiness increases. So now we have unlimited cat happiness. All right. Anyone have any questions about step 2? All right. So one thing to go over is just the notion of callback functions again. So just take a moment to look at these snippets of code and see which ones will work in our use case. All right, so who here thinks A will work? Raise your hand if you think. All right, some people. Who here thinks B will work? Okay. Who here thinks C will work? And what about D? Okay, nice. Most of you got the correct answers. So actually, in this case, all A, B, and C will work, except the last one won't work. And can anyone tell me why D won't work? Yeah, exactly. So if we call the function increment cat happiness inside onClick, it won't actually evaluate when we want it to. We want to pass a callback function into the onClick prop so that whenever we click on the div, it'll call that function. And the first 3 work because we pass in a function and not a value, but we prefer the third one in this case just because it's cleaner and we already defined the increment cat happiness function above in the code. All right, so if you do git reset -- hard and git checkout w2 - complete, you can see the complete app we have. It should just be exactly what we have here. All right, so let's do a quick recap. Just shout out the answer whenever I read the prompt. So we divide our app into components and put one in each file. Each component is a function with props as an input and returns JSX, which is HTML-like code. Each component can store internal updatable private info as state variables. Parentheses allows us to enter into a JSX environment, and inside this JSX environment, the curly braces allow us to create a mini JavaScript environment. Nice. And just some syntax reminders that we pass in props with the component name and then the prop name equals to the prop value. And then we read in those props in the child component with props dot whatever prop name we passed in. We declare state variables with the syntax const of an array of the state name and then the state setter equals to use state of the initial value. And then finally, one caveat is that React uses class name instead of class for CSS does. So anyone have any questions about React? Cool. And don't worry if you don't fully get React yet. We'll have a lot of lectures going forward about React. Also, if you're confused, go to weblab.is/react-guide, and you can see some helpful tips that we provided. And then later today, we're going to have a lecture on React lifecycle and hooks, and talk more about some of the other functions that React provides and some of the more advanced things you can do with state. But first, before lunch, we're going to have an APIs and promises lecture. So stay tuned.